Lucis Trust, a non-profit, non-political, and non-sectarian organization on the roster of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, and concerned with the establishment of world cooperation and goodwill, presents Inner Sight with your host, Robert Anderson. He, with Sarah and Dale McKechnie, President and Vice President of Lucis Trust, will discuss philosophical and spiritual topics essential to everyday life. Now here's your host, Robert Anderson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Inner Sight. Inner sight is simply seeing that which is always present, but not yet fully recognized. You have, within you, the ability to see yourself and the world around you in a new way, with new eyes. So, stay with us, and together we'll look at the world and ourselves with inner sight. Our theme for today is World Goodwill, and the Lucis Trust organization has a World Goodwill newsletter, and we'll be speaking about that today and some of the topics within it, and I think that you'll find it as exciting as I do. There are so many good topics, such as freedom from fear is something that we would all like to experience. But World Goodwill, I think that's the first step probably towards a wonderful world, one that we all maybe fantasize about, is just genuinely in our hearts, generating the feeling of goodness and goodwill towards our fellow man. I like this thought from Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey is the founder of the Lucis Trust organization. Lucis Trust sponsors this show, Inner Sight. And Alice Bailey wrote 24 volumes of books, and all of the dialogue on this show emanates from the works of Alice Bailey. And I quote, "Goodwill is the touchstone that will transform the world." And I think we'd like to explore that further, and I'd like to ask both Sarah and Dale, well, what is goodwill? Because I gave kind of a superficial definition of it. Let's go into more depth.
Goodwill is one of those words that we hear so much today, and yet I think for a lot of people it has a rather passive feel-good aspect to it, but perhaps may not strike people as something really dynamic and mobilizing. But in fact, goodwill is a dynamic spiritual energy that, as Alice Bailey said, can transform the world. And the organization called World Goodwill was formed in 1932 by Alice and Foster Bailey to give a platform to the work of people of goodwill and to show the public how widespread the men and women of goodwill are throughout the world, how active they are in their service to humanity. So what we try to do through World Goodwill is to highlight the work of these countless, perhaps at this point millions of men and women of goodwill who are actively engaged in working for a better world. The media gives us a lot of news about what's wrong in the world, and they have to do that. That's part of their responsibility. But at the same time, it's important to know that there are a lot of people, a lot of groups working with the energy of goodwill to bring about lasting change.
Right, and goodwill, as you said, goodwill has maybe seemed like kind of a passive energy or a passive idea, but it's really a dynamic idea. It's really working with an energy of love, actually, because it is said in the writings of Alice Bailey that goodwill, an expression of actual expression of goodwill, is the first indication of that humanity is beginning to express this divine love of God. And goodwill is a genuine goodwill. The energy of goodwill is the first expression. But human is what they're really capable of at the moment.
And I think it helps to point out examples to people so they get a sense of what we mean by goodwill, which can express through groups and through nations as well as individuals. One example, do you remember the earthquake in western Turkey last year.
Oh, certainly, yeah, it was tragic.
Yes, many thousands of people died.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Greece, which is a long-time enemy of Turkey, as I think most of us know, they've been at odds with each other for decades now. As soon as Greece was made aware of the earthquake, they sent teams of people to help in the Turkish towns and villages, and it was an extraordinary, spontaneous, unpremeditated response to real need. That's an example of goodwill that can cross even ordinarily separated divisions between people and groups. There are probably lots of other examples that we could think of that are not just from past history, but in current life, where under extraordinary circumstances, people will respond with genuine love. The basis of goodwill is love.
Well, I think that also this reminds me of something I read once, and I think it's very pertinent to this, and that is that if we're going to change the world, it has to start with us. And what you're saying is that both of you have used the word genuine. And I think what you're saying, too, is that it has to come from the heart. That we can actually look at not only a friend or someone close or a loved one, but even a stranger, and genuinely from our heart say, I wish him well, and to really mean it. And I guess that's what you're saying. Is that true?
Yes. It has to be a natural response. It can't be forced or labored and still retain its energy. That's why sometimes crises or disasters bring forth an expression of goodwill that might not otherwise be there.
Yes, and it is an expression of the heart, of the awakening of the heart center, and of the love that flows through the heart. And particularly when it comes as a spontaneous reaction, then you know it's genuine. It's not planned, it's not calculated, that I'm going to get rewarded if I do this and save this situation. But it comes as a genuine act of love. And I suppose the most recent one, you might say, is from the September 11th experience here in New York. There's genuine goodwill, an outpouring of goodwill and love in the aftermath of that terrible tragedy.
So what World Goodwill has done for the last 70 years is, through its newsletter, which is quarterly, and through occasional special papers that we call commentaries, and through the distribution of literature, all of which is offered at no charge because the work of World Goodwill is funded entirely by voluntary donations, where we don't have any endowment. But World Goodwill has worked to highlight the efforts of people of goodwill, to make people aware that goodwill is an energy that can bring about change, that goodwill is, in fact, the only energy that can really bring lasting constructive change. I think that's something that the world is beginning to wake up to. You can have treaties and call truces and so on, but if there isn't real goodwill, it isn't lasting. And so we've worked very closely with the United Nations Department of Public Information over the years to help publicize the work of the United Nations and its agencies. That's one of the main objectives of World Goodwill. And we offer study courses on the problems of humanity with the idea of identifying the underlying causes behind the major problems. For example, the problems of the minorities, the problems of the children of the world, the problems of the religions. We try to help people identify the subjective underlying factors behind the outer problems.
And we might make the connection here, too, that World Goodwill is actually an activity of Lucis Trust. It's just one of the activities that we're engaged in, but it is, the Lucis Trust is kind of the overall umbrella for a number of activities, and World Goodwill is one of them.
And it's our work that's most oriented toward world affairs, you could say, toward current world problems.
Kind of our outreach kind of program. But
certainly standing behind what you're saying by the gift that you're giving today. We're going to give the audience